Or
hear
for me
that
to, like,
noise.
forget that I have it going and then I still have the tab not muted. Because that can happen. Alright.
That also happens, yes.
Yep, okay, that's good there. Alright, now I can go tweeters.
Twitchers.
Mm-hmm. Alright. Yeah. Tweet. Go here. Retweet. And retweet.
Done.
And retweet. Okay. Go post in the places. Podcast news. At everyone. Boom. Yes, so I'll recap starting later tonight because I have a guest on. I don't know who that guest is, but they're actually not on before us for once.
Dope.
So maybe we can rate them.
Maybe.
Maybe. If they're still going. We shall see. But yeah, I hated having to be like having to bet against what I would normally bet against, just in hopes of finishing first in the Junkertown one.
Yeah.
That sucked. I should have just did it where I just didn't apply bets to all, but I did. Just out of habit. It was a good season though. I did pretty good across the board.
I mean, you still won in our league.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be what I do tomorrow is get in hold of everyone.
Let me see. Has this PC?
All the places. All the places. 800 discords later, and we might be in business.
Woo!
Woohoo. Where's that? Alright. Get this. Pop out the chat.
Oop. Already punching it.
Not surprised.
I shouldn't have to clean my glasses midway through the show, I would think.
No?
I would think.
That was me when I was leaving work the other day, because it was like 99 out, and I was in the freezer before.
Oh, jeez.
It's like, poof, immediately, like, it's so bad. Good times. Not really. It's been way too hot.
Yeah, it's been rough here, too.
Alright, I am all good to go. We can
Ready, steady.
we can do a show.
Yep.
Alright. Yeah, I mean without Slambo. It's
It's
probably
more strange to do a show with Slambo than
at this point, yeah. I would say that's fair. That's a fair point. All right, let's get this
rock and
started.
roll.
Maybe I'll stream after. I don't know yet. All right, started now.
You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with data and all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Only Drunk, and tonight on episode 38, we're going to go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. Some major roster rule changes hit that will affect not only the Overwatch League, but Overwatch contenders. We'll take a look back at the stage 4 playoffs and, kind of the major shakeups that went down there, and so much more. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, as there's only one of them tonight, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight over on our live show over on Twitch, and of course, thank all of our repeat listeners. Of course, as always, normally I say, I have a few friends here to help break everything down, or, I can't really say that since Slambo, as you can see, has kind of mindlessly fallen back into the abyss yet again. But I'm not so much as sure if that's the case or if he found a corner to go cry in after Seoul failed to secure their playoff bid. Either way, Slambo is not with us tonight. But I do have someone here with me tonight who is looking to claw and caw his way through the stage playoffs with the Dallas Fuel. That being Spider. Spider, Dallas, they played with house money. They made the stage playoffs. And, they took Excelsior to 5 maps. So, all in all, it was a great performance. A pretty big story for them, considering how their season as a whole had gone. But how are you doing after that?
Good. I mean, it was a great match. They took New York to a map 5. They were graciously given 2 maps by Janice. I will go into that match much later. When we cover the playoffs, I'll save most of my stuff for that. But it was a phenomenal series. Actually, all 3 games were good. It's weird that the worst game was actually the final, and I said, I'll go into a lot of that later. But we got our first non-Korean stage champion.
Woo! We did it, boys.
So it only took 4 stages, some bags of sand, and one weird tank decision for us to get there. But we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So why don't we get into the news?
Absolutely. So obviously, the season is pretty much over outside of season playoffs and the All-Star weekend. And we actually got a couple important dates that are coming up in regards to roster construction for the Overwatch League teams and the expansion teams that have yet to be announced so far. So in regards to the actual dates, we kind of got a time frame of, when stuff is happening. So on August 1st, the signing window is going to open up for teams to negotiate contract extensions with current players or to sign players from their affiliated contenders team. And this is where teams can also begin to make player trades. So again, those affiliated contenders team, as we had talked about in the past, are their academy teams. So, San Francisco Shock have Energy Esports, who we'll talk about later because they also made a pretty big sign-in. There's also British Hurricane for the London Spitfire, etc., etc. Not all of the teams had an affiliated team for whatever reason, but, a majority of the teams do. So on September 9th, this is when the inaugural season agreements officially come to an end. So any player that is not under a contract at this point will then become a free agent. So in regards to these expansion teams, because obviously we know that we're getting 4 new teams, from September 9th through October 7th, they have an exclusive window for these teams to actually sign free agents. And then on October 8th, that is when that sign-in window opens up to all of the teams. So all in all, a lot of big dates. Are we expecting the Overwatch League to kind of start at a similar time frame in regards to, when we look back? Just because, we kind of, kick things off in December, and, we'll probably get some pretty big announcements at BlizzCon again in regards to the league.
I would think so, because, you look at it right now, World Cup's going to run through November, then they're going to give them a break, and then they're going to come back in, especially with a lot of teams using Overwatch League players as their World Cup team players. They're going to give them a break, and then they're going to come in December. They're going to work with the team. We're going to see preseason again. We may actually see I wouldn't be surprised to see an expanded preseason, like rather than just 2 days of matches or whatever they did last time. Just do like almost like a full week of matches. Just go Wednesday through Saturday or something. Especially with the expansion teams because you're looking at more teams overall. But I would expect a similar release window, like do the preseason early December, then take it off and then start like beginning of the year. It's not unfeasible to think that just because of World Cup, filling the gaps and multiple contender seasons.
Yeah, 2 contender seasons. But yeah, trying to think where I was going with this. I lost my train of thought momentarily. Whatever. We'll just move on. I'm sure it will come back to me, or maybe not. So in regards to the teams as well, they now have a new rule, which is the Florida Mayhem rule. They don't actually call it that, but it is 100% the Florida Mayhem rule, and it states that teams must have a minimum of 8 players under contract by December 1st. So kind of like going back, one of the biggest question marks in regards to the inaugural season was, Florida Mayhem going out and signing Misfits. Okay, that wasn't, like, controversial by any means. It was the fact that they didn't have anyone else on the roster. Their staffing as well was very limited when compared to the majority of the Overwatch League. So, I looked at this, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, okay, they don't want another case of Florida where you have the same 6 people playing all the time. They didn't really have a great showing. There were times where both of their DPS would show up, and then there were times where, their support duo looked kind of tier 3 at times. But all in all, like, when we saw the Mayhem get more additions to their coaching staff as well as their roster, that's when we got to see a little bit more out of that team, and it really opened up the door for more opportunities for other players, rather than, that door just being very narrowly open as it was prior. So, I'm happy to see them go this route. So, hopefully we're not going to get a similar situation for Season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly like you said. It's the Florida Mayhem rule. They kind of took a look at it and said, well, first of all, it's not the best working environment for the team because if someone gets sick, they're either forced to just give that match up or they have to play sick, which isn't good in any profession, going into their jobs sick. I kind of wish they would have upped this a little more. Like 8, I still think is kind of skimming the bare minimum. Like I feel like every team should have 12, and especially with these upcoming rule changes that we're going to talk about, should definitely have 12. But I feel like 10 is kind of the minimum because then you can cover pretty much every type of spot, and you can at least plan it out a little better. If, like, we don't get the New York situation like we had in the preseason where you had Libero playing support, or Mono at one point in the season. Mono played support for New York, and not many people remember that.
Yeah.
Because Mono wasn't that good on support, but New York was New York, so they powered through it. So I feel like 10 would have been better. And I feel like most teams at this point saw what the teams went through in Season 1 and have learned kind of that lesson. And there's a team that went 0-40 that definitely learned that lesson.
Yeah, in some ways differently than others, but I finally remember what I was going to say in regards to the preseason. Hopefully this upcoming preseason we get to see all of the teams. Hopefully there's no outside shenanigans going on or anything like that. But in regards to the signings and the trades, we don't know what the final deadline is, so they're going to announce that at a later date. So in regards to, players that are turning 18, so if you turn 18 prior to the season deadline, you will be eligible to sign Overwatch League contracts for the 2019 season. So I think they said like May 1st, 2001. If you were born before then you would be eligible. So in regards to the player agreements themselves, they are no longer fixed at being 1 year with an additional 1 year option. So players and teams may now negotiate contracts for up to 3 years with a max of 1 year as an option in addition to 1 to 2 guaranteed years. So, this is where we can start wondering, like, okay, so, maybe somewhere down the line we might get to see that, franchise tag for the
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch League.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of where I think this is heading. But I think overall, all these changes and these rules make sense. I like the flexible contracts, but when you sit there and start to think about it, like, do you really want to sign them to longer than a year contract? Because Overwatch is such like a volatile game. Like the best way I can put it is think, and I'm going to use a Jane term here. Think of all the Gen 1 players for Overwatch. Think of like Tavik, Logic, Miro, Ryu Jae Hong, Toby, Unko, Soon, Taimu. Big name players. Think about their impact in the league. Not many of them made such a big impact. So I think a year is going to be standard. And then, if you do have breakouts like at the end of the season, like Unko Soon, Taimu, even Ryu Jae Hong had a little bit of a return to form. Maybe then they'll use the flex option.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So we kind of see some things that kind of like blurring or blending into like contenders. So we'll cover the contender stuff too, and then things that kind of affect both. So in regards to Overwatch contenders, the contenders rosters are now going to be capped at 8 players. So Overwatch League teams can reach out to all contenders players to arrange tryouts and negotiate contracts, provided that they inform the player's current team within 24 hours. Sign-ins of a contenders player may be subject to a buyout fee. So the fees are now negotiable, but are capped at 100% of the player's annual fee, or annual like base salary in Overwatch League, plus any applicable sign-in bonus. So this is the thing that we didn't have in writing that we had always kind of wondered on the back half, especially in regards to a certain team like New York and Flower. So academy teams affiliated with Overwatch League organizations may negotiate right-to-match clauses granting the team the right to match any offer from other Overwatch League teams wishing to sign an academy player. So that matching period is going to be limited to 7 days from the date of that initial contract submission to the league office. And you basically need to have, you need to notify the league as well as the parent team 24 hours before contacting a non-affiliated academy player to arrange a tryout or to negotiate a contract. So, like, one of the biggest question marks we had with contenders is, okay, well, like, do these teams have, like, first right to their players if this is going to be sort of a, like, farm system? So now we know that they do have the right to match, any contract offer that someone is given one of their players. So now let's say Florida, for this instance, says, you know what? Saya player's doing damn good. We need another flexible DPS that can come in and make an impact. And, maybe they look at XL2 Academy and say, we want Flower. So now this is where it gets interesting because, I have a feeling that this is just going to end up maybe even doing a bid war. Like, if they want one of the bigger names out of contenders, but at least there's more of a strong connection between these Overwatch League teams and their affiliated teams, knowing that they can still have a better opportunity at keeping them within the same organization, which is really great to see.
Yeah, I mean, this was always something that was strange to me initially when they announced the academy teams, is putting someone on the academy team basically didn't mean anything. It was just like, okay, cool, we have Mangachu, but we don't have first rights to him unless they specifically negotiated the right to match clause, which a lot of contenders players, from what I've understand, at least had something similar to that. Maybe not quite this specific, but you definitely know Flower did, because they came out and said it when he was signed to Excelsior's academy team. But yeah, I think this is all good. The big thing that stuck out to me, and I don't think we got to it yet, is the blackout windows. Like they are going to institute blackout windows for contenders now, which was always my big point in contenders. Like, what happens if a team just sweeps in and pulls like 3 players off of their contenders team right before playoffs? Like that team doesn't deserve playoffs anymore.
That kind of happened to NRG when Damon got picked up by Shanghai Dragons.
Right, exactly. So all these rules together, like the right to match clause, the contenders blackout, and the big one we're going to talk about next, all basically make contenders a much more viable solution for a lot of players. I do specifically like that Blizzard is taking the feedback of, I'm sure this came from lawyers, I'm sure this came from the players. Like, they're taking it to heart and saying, okay, this is what we want. And it actually brings them a lot closer to traditional minor league sports. Like, now that they have, the signing windows and the academy teams and all this stuff, it's going to, and like I said, the big one we're going to talk about next, it's going to make it a much more fluid system, which I like, because right now it's kind of like, are you an Overwatch League player? No. Okay, so you're a Contenders player. Like, and you're basically stuck as that unless somebody really needs something specific, or somebody gets hurt or something like that, or for some reason you want 5 supports on your team.
Yeah. I mean, this is all great stuff. If only they could, maybe pay out the tier 2 teams on time, which is still an issue in trials, which is another sour subject.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah,
that's all Blizzard, man. They need to fix that.
It's murky water, because that definitely does affect the scene and how it can grow. So, obviously the big one, which we haven't talked about, is two-way players. So, teams and players can now negotiate the right to designate a player as eligible to compete in contenders on an affiliated team. So, any player that is on a roster may agree to be eligible for contenders play, but you can have a max of 4 players designated as two-way during each Overwatch League stage. So those players must be identified and submitted to the league office prior to each stage. And two-way players basically have certain rules that they have to follow in regards to whether they are eligible to play in contenders. So that includes one being that the two-way players count towards the Overwatch League roster limit of 12. They still have to earn the same salary and benefits as an Overwatch League player. Two-way players also count towards the 8-man contenders roster limit for the weeks in which their contenders team designates them as eligible to compete. And they will lose contenders eligibility if they appear in more than 2 Overwatch League matches in a stage. So right now, they say you can have a max of 2 two-way players compete in any single contenders match, with no player being eligible to appear in both contenders and Overwatch League matches in the same week. So that's quite a bit of things going here. So okay, let's talk about the big thing. My big concern about this. Okay, so Season 1, right? We had a lot of teams mismanage players. I am hoping that doesn't bleed into Season 2, especially when they introduce a new eligibility for players. But, I feel like, okay, this could open up the door to have people have more of an investment in watching contenders, because that has always been
definitely
a huge issue for contenders. A lot of the time, these tier 2 or Path to Pro tournaments only get 1,000, 2,000 views. Even in the playoffs, we saw it for Beat Invitational. We've seen it last season during contenders, and maybe you're not going to always get the biggest Overwatch League player name, appearing with that eligibility clause as a two-way player, but it does give you an opportunity to have someone maybe Mendo pop in and actually get some playtime when he would just be perma-benched on the Houston Outlaws.
Exactly. I really like this. I really like this system that they've come up with. The fact that they can have multiple people count on both rosters, and this actually, they mentioned that they kind of have to get the same salary and benefits as an Overwatch League player, but you could easily negotiate as a team and as a player, be look, I'm a two-way player, but I'll primarily be on the contenders team. Pay me the base salary, the base benefits, and if I get moved up to an actual Overwatch League team, then you adjust my salary at that point. Like you can easily put that stuff in a contract.
Right.
So this opens the door for people like Mendo, IDDQD, players that have phenomenal talent, but they never really got the chance to show that because teams kind of set up a strategy. They realized hopefully they realized who works best together, and just some people just didn't click. Numlocked or Clockwork or IDDQD or any of that. You don't know what was going on behind the scenes. You had a phenomenal player in Grim Reality who just, I feel like, needed some work, and he just never got the opportunity to get that kind of level of work. So he became a coach, which I guess worked out for them because they won the stage playoffs. So I can't discount that too much. But overall, this is a cool rule, and you touched on the other big side of it is this creates more investment in contenders. Like if you find out that and I'm just going to keep going back to this, like NRG IDDQD is playing in a contenders match, or heck, even if say for some reason XQC was still playing, but they still went with OGE and, just humor me for a minute. You could take somebody that's popular, put them on contenders, but still have them in the Overwatch League. And that actually kind of double dips. Like you got a popular person, you got somebody cashing in on Overwatch League fame, I'll use quotes there, and putting them on contenders and raising up the tier 2 scene. So it's like everybody wins in that situation. The only thing I'm curious about this is how it interacts with trades. Like if they're on an Overwatch League team, I feel like they're still locked into that trade window. So that kind of takes places out of contenders for legitimate people who want into the tier 2 seed. I don't think it's as big of a deal, but that's something that I'm going to keep a close eye on because they can put 4 people per stage on a contenders team. That's half of a contenders roster.
Mm-hmm.
So if half of your contenders roster is on your Overwatch League team, and sure they're on the bench or whatever, playing as a 2-way player, that's still 4 slots that someone else in open division didn't get, or someone else in the tier 2 level did not get. So it's I don't know. It's interesting to see how this is going to play out from a personnel perspective, but as a rule perspective, I really like it.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder whether or not they should raise the contenders roster limit a little bit, because 8 is pretty minimal as well.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't sync it up and just put 12 and 12, and then it's level across the board.
Yeah, because right now we do see quite a few of these contenders or even trials teams that are running anywhere from like 10 to 12 as well. But yeah, it does open up the door for people who didn't get to see a ton of time played. Like, going back to Houston, like Fact Fiction also didn't play in that many games either, and he's, a phenomenal main tank. And, they didn't really bring him into too many matches overall just because, Muma was doing so great for the Outlaws. But you had a ton of talent out there. For, Boston, like, we've rarely got to see all of their support players because that was half of their roster. Avast and Snow, like, hardly got to see any time. Obviously, Shanghai having to replace some of their Chinese players. They might have gotten to see some play on Team CC if this was in place prior. We had, Joe Meister, Dayfly, Tizzy. The list goes on and on. There were quite a few players that just didn't really have a great opportunity to show what they have on the main stage for whatever reason. I mean, some players might have just not been participating in scrims. Maybe they were on block party duty like Mendo. Who knows? But I'm excited for this, and, I am really curious to see how these teams are going to approach this. Because right now, let's say you have, your normal 6-stack. Okay, so that means you could have, 2 2-way players. Or people only going to have, say, 1 2-way player. That way they still have a flex option on their team. But, do you think there's going to be, specific roles that we see put as a 2-way player more so than some of the others? Because, you look at the value of flex DPS in the game. And, obviously, expanding hero pools are a huge asset on Overwatch League teams and contenders teams for that matter.
I think so. I think flex DPS and flex support might see the most. Tanks typically work in duos, so I don't think you want to use many of your spots up on tank duos. Overall, like I said, probably flex DPS or flex support are probably my two picks. Flex support would probably be my primary pick just because how important it has been in Overwatch League. And I feel like that going forward, like if your flex support is not up to the task, you want to kind of have an option to pull someone else in just to try out to see if maybe they'll do a little bit better. But you know, I think it's going to vary based on team and talent and what they really need. Like a team like Shanghai early in the season probably would have benefited from a flex tank, regardless of the previous statement. But a team like Houston would actually probably benefit from just a core DPS player.
Yeah, just a tracer. I mean,
not even a flex DPS player, just a DPS player.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be highly dependent on the team. But if I had to peg it, I'd probably say flex support just because how important they've been.
Absolutely. So kind of like, there's another news bit here that kind of might be considered associated with this, because I could definitely see this player as a two-way player moving forward. So a bit of contenders news, which is also Overwatch League related, because he is a former player from the Overwatch League. Rascal has actually found a new home. So Rascal has returned to the United States. He'll be back in Overwatch Esports, and he was actually signed by Energy Esports, which is the affiliated team of the San Francisco Shock. So we do know that Contender Season 2 and Season 3 will finish up by the end of the year, so both these will be taking place before the next Overwatch League season. So a lot of players have plenty of time to show off their talent in hopes of being signed for the upcoming season. And, you know, Rascal, he was with the London Spitfire at the start of the season. You know, he was with them when they won the Stage 1 title. He was then traded to the Dallas Fuel, who at the time, you know, were going through some changes. Okay, a lot of changes.
That's a nice way to put it.
A lot of changes. And, yeah, they ended up releasing him during Stage 3. And I'm going to use air quotes because I don't know how else to do this. For his commitment to the team not meeting management's standards. Or, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse you. Yeah, you gotta keep your toxicity away from, you know, your mic. I don't want it to, like, seep into your monitor and then transmit.
I don't think
all
it's
the way over
toxicity at this point. I think it's kind of proven fact after last night.
That's a fair point. Well, anyway, so what does this mean exactly? Well, it means that the Shock will have the right to match any offer that Rascal could receive if he were to get approached by another Overwatch League team. So the big question, you know, obviously Rascal, he has a very expanded hero pool. He's a flex DPS, and you know, something that we don't see a lot is the fact that he does not only play Projectile, but he also plays Hit Scan. We've seen him on Genji, we've seen him on Junkrat, he plays McCree, he plays Widow, we've seen him play Pharah, he techs in Mei from time to time. I mean, there are so many hero pools in his expanded roster overall. So is this someone that you would consider to be maybe like a prime, you know, two-way player? If, you know, he were to get picked up for the Overwatch League, because I'm pretty sure how they have it is, you know, he would have to be signed to an Overwatch League team to be marked as one.
No, just by the pure fact that I think he'll be a core member of an Overwatch team. I don't see a world where we're getting at least 4 expansion teams in the Overwatch League where Rascal is not on at least some sort of roster starting. Dallas looked actually decent in some of the games he played. That was kind of where they went through their first renaissance and actually started picking up a few wins and looking a little decent. And, you know, Tank Moo happened and I don't remember it. I blacked out. But yeah, I think he's too strong of a player. Like I wouldn't rule it out being a two-way player, but I think that status would quickly be alleviated just by his pure raw talent. Like I think he's going to come into contenders. I think, you know, regardless of how the team does overall, you know, how many map 5s they lose or win, you know, how many basically tiebreakers they force, and how many tournaments they lose. I think overall, I think he's just going to make too big of a mark, and some team's going to pick him up. Now, I do know they did win a tournament.
Yes.
I'm not clueless.
It's Pitch Championship NA, which they had just won.
So I do know NRG can win tournaments, and they have a better shot with Rascal. I think any team that uses him effectively has a better shot at winning a tournament than they had by not having Rascal.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me about this sign-in is just the fact that he has so much flexibility, and with that, it kind of bleeds into both of their DPS players' hero pools, just because he does play hit scan and projectile, and we've seen Shredis and Poise, who are both on energy, play a lot of roles too, and some of them do kind of, they kind of blur together in between, Shredis and Poise, but, Rascal can play pretty much any hero, so this is really going to be interesting to see how exactly they're going to incorporate Rascal. I would assume that, if they go out and make a pretty big signing like this, that Rascal would be one of the starting DPS. Then it can, work in, a Hanzo or a Tracer or whatever, Widow, to kind of complement that. But, I have a feeling like, based off of what we've seen, I would prefer Rascal to be in a hit scan role, and then you could have Poise and Stratus do the projectile at that point, since they both do play a little bit of everything as well. But yeah, I was happy that Energy won, for the longest time, as someone has followed the scene for an extended period of time, Energy was always going back a ways that they were the stream team, right? This was back when, Siegel was still involved, and
Harblue.
They had very big names, and a meme was basically built on their lack of performance in tournaments, right? They got
in everything.
They got basically 7th or 8th place in everything that they played, and it finally dawned on them lately. Last season of Contenders, they made the playoffs. They lost in the quarterfinals, but that's another discussion. But we recently saw them win Pit Championship NA, which was amazing, so the meme is dead. They are no longer always out before they knew it, in this case. But I'm excited for this partnership and seeing exactly how much of an impact Rascal is going to be making in Contenders. And there's no doubt in my mind that he'll be picked up either for an existing Overwatch League team or one of these new expansion teams, probably in one of the earlier windows. But it definitely hypes me up even more to see how Energy incorporates him. So in other news, guys, we also have the Excelsior, and they are teaming up with Verizon for an upcoming charity event. They're actually doing a tournament. It's like a free-for-all tournament, and it will be streamed live over on the New York Excelsior Twitch channel. This will be broadcasted via Verizon's pre-commercial 5G network, which will be a first for Overwatch. So the proceeds for this tournament will all go towards Digital Girl, which is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to empowering inner-city youth and young girls to pursue careers and studies in science, technology, engineering, and math. And I didn't really have a lot of time to really look into the actual players of said tournament. I know they had a couple of streamers. I believe they had a couple of the guys over from the 5 Deadly Venoms crew, which is the NYXL fan club team. I don't know how to describe them. Basically, they always put together viewing parties in the New York area. I know Fist has been involved with them too as well, going to their stuff. But the matches are going to be streamed by everyone's favorite pineapple slasher.
Leak Boy himself.
Yes, Leak Boy himself, Slasher, and Jim Basco. So, I don't know if this is going to be something that I tune into. I don't know exactly what this 5G network is going to bring in regards to stability. So, I might be interested just see how it runs in that way. But, I wish they had a little bit more to draw people in regards to the people that they had involved, though.
Yeah, I'm interested from a tech side. I'm curious to see how good 5G actually is. But the streamers and the content and stuff, nobody really stood out to me. But I do hope that more teams do this kind of stuff in the off season because it kind of keeps the buzz and the hype going. So, I'd like to see something, cheeky like, Dallas versus Houston in some funny matches or, battle for LA in some custom games, stuff like that. Like just stupid things in the off season. Like it doesn't have to be on LAN. It can be on, live because it's not for anything. It's just for fun. And, it can drive proceeds to charity. It can drive, just viewership for teams, just something to keep the buzz alive. And hopefully not include Slasher. Like just like I am a terrible caster. I don't do it a lot, so I'm bad at it, but I am available. Like just send me an offer and a time and I will do it for you over Slasher. Like he needs to be removed from the scene as much as possible at this point.
Well, you can always get your fake news on Twitter from whatever that Twitter handle is, the Slasher News one, which is
the
hilarious.
Slasher News.
Yes.
I enjoy that more than the actual news. So
fair enough. All right, so shifting gears, guys, let's talk about one of the biggest storylines to come out of Season 1 of the Overwatch League, and that is Owen 40. As you showed the the customized jersey, which is the proper way to do it, unlike what Edinar had posted, and that is the fact that the Dragons finished their imperfect season, going 0-40. So, despite their rigorous training, there you go, as I pulled it up on stream. Despite
I had it ready.
Absolutely. So, despite that rigorous training schedule, which drew the ire and concern of a lot of the community on 2 occasions, because it didn't really look like anything had changed, the Shanghai Dragons failed to secure that first win throughout Season 1. They closed out the season by dropping all 4 of their maps against the San Francisco Shock, and they finished with a minus 120 map differential. Yikes. So, just to put that in comparison, let's look at the other team that didn't do so hot this season, that have also been kind of a meme in their own right, that being the Florida Mayhem. Mayhem, they won 7 games, and they finished the season with a minus 78 map differential. I'm no mathematician, and Slambo's not here to even attempt it, but I know that's 42 maps. That's a pretty big chunk of games out of the season. Yikes. And, to even, further blow it up, if you look at, say, New York, who were obviously the best team in the league, they had a plus 83 map differential. They won 105 more maps. And, Shanghai lost 98 more maps than New York. That's a staggering difference from the best team to the worst team. And, it's probably a bigger differential, when you compare that to some of these other leagues out there. So, obviously, the Dragons, coming in, they opted to start the season fielding an all-Chinese roster. And, we were all, wondering, what is going on with this team? Why did they decide to go to, LGD Gaming when there were better players on the table out of that region? So, immediately, right out of the gates, there were a lot of, raised flags. I had followed the Pacific scene. I had higher hopes. Higher than most people probably for a Chinese team, and it didn't work. Their DPS lineup probably showed the most potential, at least early on, and, they opted to, bring on some Korean players, so hopefully, revigorate the team, get them to that first win, and that just didn't happen. They went out, they got Fearless, they got Otto, they picked up Zhu Fanjun, aka Sky, from Miraculous Youngster. They picked up Gagiri, which was a huge sign-in at the time, and, she definitely had an impact. Otto, I think, honestly, out of all of the Dragons players, Otto was the one that surprised the hell out of me the most. I think out of all of the players, he was a definite standout, and that's not to take anything away from Gagiri, but Fearless, I wasn't that impressed with Fearless. I think Gagiri did most of the work on the tank line, but Otto was the one coming in through the clutch most of the time. And, we saw Shanghai have the best opportunity this stage when they went up against Florida, and they couldn't close it out. And it's unfortunate because like we saw like glimpses of hope for this team, and stage 4 ended up being Shanghai's worst stage, having only walked away with like 4 map wins throughout the entire stage. It's just like it was one thing after another for Shanghai. So with that being said, obviously season 2 is going to be here before we know it. Maybe not. I mean, it's quite a bit of ways out, but that window is going to be opening sooner rather than later. So if you're in that position where you're trying to figure out exactly how you can better approach to rewrite this ship for Shanghai, where would you start? Do you start from the management side? Do you start with the coaches? Do you start with the players? Because obviously, I feel like there are definite issues just across the board at each level at this point.
Start from the ground up. Just burn it down and start from the ground up. I think if you want to do a mixed roster, you need to find somebody that can speak both languages in the roster. Because I think this team has talented players on it, but by time they righted some of the behind the scenes problems, it was too late. Other teams were too far ahead, and they were just playing catch up on a pure language barrier basic level. So I would start with the coaching staff. I would make a decision very early that if you want a Korean team, stick with the Korean team and maybe pick 1 or 2 Chinese players who can kind of fill that gap and acclimate to speaking Korean. If you want to go an all Chinese roster, I mean, you're welcome to another 0-40 season. But I wouldn't make that mistake again. Teams have shown that you can run multiple nationalities together and it can work very well. Just look at the Fusion. The Fusion are actually, I don't know about after the trade window, but at the start of the season, they were the most diverse team with 9 nationalities per 11 players or something. It was something ridiculous. Like everybody was from somewhere else. So that can work, but you have to start very early and you need somebody that can play translator. And I feel like they never really had anybody on the team that could do that. Like the reason the Gladiators worked so well when Fisher came in is because Bishu was able to kind of interpret and work things out to the point where Fisher picked it up, and then Fisher was translating for Void later in the season. Mm-hmm. So you need somebody like that. So they need to take a step back and pick something really early. First of all, they need a coach that can work with any nationality that they pick. So they have to make that decision first. Like, let's find a coach and see what he can work with, and then base it off of that. There's a lot of talent in the Chinese scene that didn't get picked up. I fully expect, them to go with a mixed roster again. I don't, as popular as China is and as big as it is, I don't see them completely shutting it out and going like the London route and just buying Korean teams. So they need to take a step back. They need to find a coach who can do Chinese and Korean and, English, whatever they decide to do. And then from there, they can take a look at the players. Like, they have Fearless, they have Kaguri, they have Dia, they have Otto. They have talented players. They have flaws. I don't want to, overtalk them because they did finish 0-40. But they have a lot of potential. So I feel like this team can turn it around in season 2, but they need to start from the ground up. They need to put a good coaching staff in place and then work around that coaching staff. And the biggest thing they have to avoid in season 2 is the mistakes they made early in season 1 by letting politics and hubris basically sink the team before they even got to the practice round. And the final thing they need to fix is their practice schedule. Like, absolutely. Nobody should be practicing 10 hours a day. Like, I can tell you why stage 4 was their worst stage. First of all, they lost their coach. Second of all, they were still practicing on the same schedule, as far as everybody knows. Nobody's going to want to play under those conditions when you're 0-30. Like, come on, guys. Like, they would have been better to let off the reins and just let them, just let them go. Just let them do what they can, loose teachings, out to pasture, all that stuff. Just, the season was gone at that point. Stage was a possibility if they turned it around like Dallas did. But honestly, at that point, they were just hunting for a win. So they should have stepped off the gas at that point. So I think they just need everything. They need everything.
Yeah, and let's say they go the route where they want to build a Chinese roster, right?
Right.
So there are two teams in particular that absolutely would be the best choice right now. And no, it's not MY, because MY is come and gone for quite some time. The two standouts, one of them has had a little bit more of a fallen out lately, that being Vici Gaming, but they are a very well-known Chinese team that has a ton of talent. The other one, Lucky Future Zenith, is another standout that have been doing amazing. I want to say, I'm trying to remember if it was Contenders that they won. Let me check real quick. Yeah, they had won Contenders last season in China. They did really well. LGD Gaming, who was the core initially bought for the Shanghai team, were second in that one. But Lucky Future Zenith has a ton of names, and they're also Korean. So there is that if they want if they want to have a good team. So there's so many ways they could do it. But even their academy team didn't do so terrible. I think they finished third in Contenders. But
Yeah.
the names on that team just aren't as big compared to some of the other players and teams that are out there. But, they did pick up some of the MY players for Team CC. So, they did get some in the academy team at least. But definitely, something needs to happen. The whole training resume, whether it stayed the same or not, we might never know. It didn't sound like it did. Or it never did change. But, there's got to be a point where you just draw the line in the sand and say, this just isn't working. And, you can see the wear and tear, on the players' faces. You saw it all the time with Dia when he was on the stage. And just seeing, how exhausted he looked all the time. So, hopefully they'll be able to break the streak that they're currently on going into Season 2. And, I would love nothing more than for the Shanghai to just open up the season with a win. I feel like that will just, depending on how many players are still on the team, would just take all of the weight off of their shoulders, and they could start to have more fun with it. Because we kind of saw that effect that happened with Dallas Fuel over the weekend.
Exactly.
So, they definitely had a better showing, and, they really didn't have anything to lose. So at this point, Shanghai, come on, this is a perfect opportunity, so just figure out what you need to do. Make the sign-ins that you think are going to be best for the team. But really, at the end of the day, yes, not having a good translator was definitely one of the final nails in the coffin for Shanghai. And, we saw how valuable Bishu was, and, God forbid he gets traded, his trade value would be through the damn roof because of that. But moving on, obviously, we did wrap up the final week of the regular season, and with that, we now know who is going to be advancing to the season playoffs. So, we had a lot on the line last week. We saw who was going into the stage playoffs. We know who's in the season playoffs. So, we got our top 6, and, the season playoffs are starting next month. So, as we already know, New York Excelsior were the first team to secure their playoff spot. They did so before Stage 4 had even started. So they are guaranteed a trip to the semifinals after finishing first in the Pacific Division. Obviously, they had the best record throughout the regular season as well, so they got additional bonuses for that. And it was the LA Valiant that stood atop the Atlantic Division when all was said and done. Following their great performance in Stage 4, they too secured a bye and will be playing in the semifinals. And joining them, we have the Boston Uprising. This is the only team that had a perfect stage, barring, their playoff performance. And, we saw them hit that bump in the road with that drastic meta shift in Stage 4. And, it took them, pretty far into the stage to actually get a win. So, at least it wasn't an 0-10 stage, so, that was something for them. But the other 3 teams in the field, we have the LA Gladiators, we have London Spitfire, and the Frankenstein nationality team that is the Philadelphia Fusion. So in regards to the seeding, now we have New York in first, LA Valiant are in second, Boston has a 3rd seed, Gladiators are 4th, Spitfire are 5th, and Philadelphia are 6th. So, we kick things off July 11th, and we are all expecting the playoffs to be on patch 1.24 because we know Contenders is going to be started in July, also being played on patch 1.24, and there would be absolutely zero reason for the Overwatch League playoffs not to be on that patch. So, we have, for the matches, obviously we'll go into this later on when we get closer to the playoffs, but we have the Gladiators going up against London. So, just a little bit of background. Right now, the Gladiators have won that series 4-0 if you include the preseason. They took all 3 of the matches in the regular season. Then we have Boston and Philadelphia. That series is tied 2-2. So, here's the big question, assuming we are on patch 1.24, is this going to be Hanzo Ryzen at this point? Do we expect to see Hanzo 2.0 make a drastic shift again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that they won't play Hanzo more on this patch just because of how strong he is, even after the Storm Arrow nerf. We're going to see a big drop in Junkrat play because a lot of popular defense strategies right now is Widow Junkrat. And that's going to shift to Double Sniper because Hanzo actually fills the same role as Junkrat and is able to pull off the combo with Zarya much easier than Tire Grav. So we're going to see a lot more Hanzo. There's some other effects that could happen because of this patch, but I think Hanzo's going to be the big one right now.
Okay, so kind of looking at the opposite end of the spectrum, obviously we saw the impact that Brigitte had. Some teams were favoring running Brigitte a lot more than others, say Dallas Fuel.
Yeah.
But, this will have the nerf to the Shield Bash cooldown and the Rally Armor decrease. So do you expect a little bit of a fall off for Brigitte as well?
I mean, statistically, we're going to see fall off just because Dallas isn't in the playoffs.
That is a fair point.
But to not ironically answer your question, I think her usage will probably dip a little bit, but it's going to be about the same. She's going to be used a little more specifically on certain maps and to counter certain comps. But like the 20 to 30% usage range where she's at now for teams that aren't named Dallas Fuel is about where I expect her to be. I don't see any other huge meta shifts other than Hanzo taking Junkrat's spot and Double Sniper becoming majorly prevalent. We may see an uprise in the GOATS comp just for teams that want to challenge Double Sniper, which if you don't know what the GOATS comp is, it's basically like, what is it, 3-3, and it's Lucio, and they rush the point, and I didn't stream on Friday because you guys were doing the back cap, but we played Horizon with the GOATS comp. We were like, let's try the GOATS comp on Horizon, and we literally took both points in like a minute, and somebody in chat was like, okay, I now have cancer. What the hell was that? Like, I played Zarya, and I finished that round with like 40% to ultimate, and my average energy was 80. So that's how fast we took the points. So I expect maybe we'll see a little more cheeky comps like that. But yeah, as far as like Brigitte goes, I don't see her changing too much.
Yeah, and if we do see some 303, I hope to God it isn't being put in when they're going against a Widowmaker that is on high ground, just going completely unopposed like we kind of saw in the stage playoffs.
It is very, very map dependent. Like yes. I said, we ran it on Horizon because Horizon's a very good map to do that on because there's not a lot of sight lines. And I am going to do... I didn't get the Dallas footage I want because Seoul basically ruined any chance of footage I had for taking Dallas defense because Seoul never let Dallas put up a defense. Which good for Seoul. That's exactly what you need to do against Dallas's composition, especially on Blizzard World. So I will probably in the off season maybe do like comp videos, like why certain comps work and how they're supposed to work, because I'm also working on analysis for a Scrub Cup team, and they really need to know why certain comps work So I'm going to kind of kill two birds with one stone here.
Absolutely. So in other news, we do have an update for the London Spitfire. Obviously, we had talked about, some players getting set to inactive very recently. And that was like last month even. So this is very recent. So we got an update. So those players that the Spitfire moved to inactive last month, so that's Hakopen, Wahile, Hurek, and Tizzy, they have all been released from the Spitfire. They came to agreements on that. The players wanted out, and the Spitfire released them. So, Hakopen, Wahile, and Hurek were all signed from that GC Busan roster that railroaded their way from Apex Challengers to winning Apex, being the first team to do that, which was unbelievable. They were signed back in November. And then we had Tizzy, who was brought in from Runaway, and that was back in March. Now, out of all those players, Tizzy was the only one of them that did not get to see any play in regards to the Overwatch League. We didn't see him pop in for the final match or anything like that, like we saw for some other players. And we already talked about, the playoffs, but, London is set to face the Gladiators then. But I do have an update, and this was, I think, a couple of days ago. One of these players actually already got signed for a Contenders team, and that being Hureg. So Hureg was signed by Runaway, so he'll be competing in the upcoming season of Contenders Korea. So, I'm not going to say, I'm surprised by this, because obviously they were moved to inactive, so, they weren't going to be seeing any play, but at least now it opens up the door for them to seek other opportunities. So, glad that Hureg got a team to go to, but man, every time I look at Runaway, it sinks my heart knowing that they can't win a tournament. So it's a bittersweet feeling.
Ouch. So they're the Korean NRG, and now they're
No. Okay, so they aren't finishing 7th or 8th. They go deep
I know. But they're basically what is it? Reunited.
Yes. They are hashtag forever second in Korea.
Right. So I fully expect Tizzy to be signed to at least a Contenders team or an expansion team, because tanks are hard to find, and Tizzy was a good tank. So I don't I don't understand this decision, because they had Fisher and Gesture, and then they got rid of Fisher and then signed Tizzy. Okay, so are you just taking high level tanks and hoping to sell them later? Because you clearly have decided that Gesture was your tank. So I expect Tizzy to. I actually expect all of these players to find a team, because they're too good not to be on a team. It's kind of the Rascal situation again, and it really speaks to the level of talent London had at the beginning of the season and how much they squandered that talent over the season. That's a whole discussion on its own of how London basically took the best team in the league and squeaked into the playoffs. So I don't know. I am happy that they officially released these players, and from what I've been reading, it was basically the players' decision to be released this quickly, because most of them seem to have offers on the table from other places. So, good for London for doing what they need to do.
Yeah, it is interesting how London basically had, they went out, they signed 2 rosters between GC Busan, who were the hottest team at the time, and Kontu Panthera, which were another one of the top talented Korean teams outside of Lunatic High. We saw how Seoul went down. That's another story in itself. But it was interesting to see, this is one of the first teams that it's we have 12 players. And now they basically dropped, or traded away half of that roster at this point. So, that's just crazy to me. They basically went from 12, and now they basically have 6. Because, they traded Fisher away, they got rid of Rascal, they just released 4 players. No other team in the league has had that much fluctuation, so that's interesting to note overall. But, it does open up the door for them to sign some more talent, so hopefully the Spitfire will be able to turn things around, just because, they were out to such a great start in Stage 1, and then they slowly started to slow down and just, yeah. So, at least Profit is good on Brigitte. I mean, that is something. But man, I hope they put in a good show in the season playoffs, just because that like between them and Boston, those were the two teams that like, oh god, I hope they can be able to right this ship before it's too late. But worst case scenario, they have a couple of those guys over in EU that are looking to represent their home country. You never know. Like, we could see some drastic changes for London, maybe being a UK team. Who knows? Or maybe all those players will sign somewhere else. Also in Europe for an expansion team. You never know. It could be a crazy, just a couple of months of sign-in. So definitely pay attention to that. But anyways, guys, let's talk about the week that was. Obviously, we had a ton of matches happening before Sunday's games, and I would love to talk about all these matches and break some of them down and share takeaways like we normally do, but it's playoff time. Like, we'll talk about the results, and then we'll talk about the stage playoffs, because that's really the meat and the potatoes. So going back to Wednesday, we saw the LA Gladiators sweep the Shanghai Dragons 4-0. We saw the Valiant continue their winning ways, this time against the San Francisco Shock. They took it 3-1. And then the Seoul Dynasty put up one of their best performances. And this, honestly, this match against Dallas was one of the best series that we had all season. Like, it was entertaining. Yeah. Like, I was heavily invested, obviously, as were you, for different reasons. But this was one of the...
same reason, different team.
Well, yeah. But we had similar stakes on the line, just different areas of playoff contention anyway. But this one did not disappoint by any stretch, and Dynasty ended up winning this one 3-1 against the Fuel. On Thursday, we saw the Houston Outlaws defeat Philadelphia Fusion 3-1. We saw the London Spitfire 4-0 the Florida Mayhem, and then Boston, they took it to New York, dropping New York 3-1. So, they had the shovels, right?
No comment. Like, New York looked bad that game. Like, I don't even know how much actual bags of sand they brought to that, because and we'll talk about this in the finals too, but they definitely seem like they really let off the gas for their trading regiment. Like, I think they let off the gas a little too much.
Yep. So moving on to Friday, we saw New York bounce back. They defeated the Houston Outlaws 3-2. We saw the LA Gladiators defeat Seoul Dynasty 3-1, which eliminated Seoul Dynasty from playoff contention for the season playoffs. And that was with iRemix back in the lineup, by the way. They weren't playing Fisher. So
you guys were gifted. We were gifted a chance.
We were winning that series before this match. In the prior matches, and then Fisher not playing. I'm like, okay, we could do this, and then it didn't happen. And then we recorded the back cap. So both Ren's team, the Houston Outlaws, and then my team, the Seoul Dynasty, got eliminated on the same night. And we purposely waited until both of those matches happened before we recorded. And that was a rough opening.
I haven't listened to that show, and I can already feel the salt.
Then to close out Friday night, we saw the Dallas Fuel pick up another, a huge win here when they defeated LA Valiant 3-1. On Saturday, we saw the Philadelphia Fusion defeat London Spitfire 3-1. So London winning that one map was enough for Dallas to get their stage playoff spot. And I love seeing that reaction video that they had during that series. That was great to see.
I have a funny story for this one real quick. I couldn't watch that game, because it was Father's Day. Well, not Father's Day, but we were prepping for Father's Day and we wanted to take the kids out and stuff. But I was like, I can't watch this match. It's too stressful. So I will go out, do our thing, and I'll check in on it, but I'll check later just to make sure what happened. And then, I'll go back and watch it later. So we're at the mall. We're actually walking back to the car, and I'm like, oh, it's 3-0. I kind of expected this. I was like, well, let me see what's going on in this game, because I did see the score and I saw that it was 3-2 and it was very close. And it was right at the end, right as they were rounding the corner at Gibraltar. So I'm literally walking in the parking garage. I'm like, watch the kids. Because I don't want my kids to be hit by a car. So I'm telling my wife, I'm not watching them. So watch both of them. And literally in the parking lot, I'm going, yes, yeah, woo. And she's like, I take it they won the map. And I said, yeah, but man, did they wait till the last minute to do it.
Absolutely. And that was the same match that I lost a jersey in in regards to some of the pick'ems. Cause whoever was in second for the majority of the season had picked Dallas to beat the Valiant for the upset, and he was the only one in the league for the Chunkertown FM1, and I tilted Valiant, so then he leapfrogged me, so it was like up like 150, and then I'm like, great, now I have to go into Saturday and have to hope for an upset, and I'm like, okay, who has the best shot? We had Spitfire against the Fusion, I know how Spitfire have played, so I'm like, okay, that's maybe. Shanghai I didn't even think about, because I'm not going
Never
to
bet on
I'm
Shanghai.
not gonna bet on Shanghai until maybe sometime in season 2 when they have a win. And I'm like, Florida? No. There's no way. So I'm like, I was pulling for London, didn't happen. So unfortunately finishing second in that one. But, a lot at stake happened in that match, so you had your high moments. I had a punch in the heart. But I was really happy for Dallas. Just to secure that spot, even if it was just based off of someone else helping them along the way. So elsewhere on Saturday, we saw the Shock defeat the Shanghai Dragons. Again, we noted this one was 4-0, and then the Boston Uprising swept the Florida Mayhem 4-0. So all in all, it was a crazy week, a lot on the line. Some teams had to have a little bit of help along the way. Seoul still had a shot, but they lost to the Gladiators, which wouldn't have mattered anyway, because the Fusion beat London, because that was the other part of the other plan for Seoul to make their way in. So even if they did win that game, Fusion would have won out in the end on map differential and having one extra win all in all. But that set up, the playoffs for the stage. And the Gladiators ended up getting the best record of the stage. And who did they pick for the stage playoffs but the LA Valiant? And I don't have the clip at hand, but, they basically were just talking about, like, well, the Valiant have given us the most trouble. And, they're always talking about fighting just through the thick of it. And, they picked the hardest match in their minds. And, last stage, like, I was hoping we would get the battle for LA in the playoffs. This stage, we got to see it happen. And it was a very close series. This one ended in favor of the Valiant, 3-2 against the Gladiators, and, quite a bit went on in this series. So we saw the Valiant full hold the Gladiators on Watchpoint Gibraltar. We saw both teams complete their attacks on Horizon Lunar Colony, with the Gladiators completing the map a second time, before they ended up full holding the Valiant on their time make attack. We saw the Valiant manage to finish Cadence Row. This was before overtime had kicked in. They had like 5 seconds left, so like that's
close.
You don't want to cut it that close, because you could risk not getting an overtime or not getting a time bank attack, just because finishing before overtime guaranteed you 1 minute on your attack. And their defense ended up holding on to force that map 5 on Dorado. And then this is what I was alluding to earlier with the 303, right? So, the Valiant, they weren't able to finish out Dorado on their attack. Their defense ended up getting a full hold. So, Soon's Widowmaker in this series was absolutely phenomenal. Surefour had been doing pretty good overall, but Soon is like Surefour's kryptonite. Like, Soon had Surefour's number. And here's the thing. This is always the thing that drives me up the wall about the Gladiators. I love watching this team, but they have this habit of, if Surefour isn't winning the Widowmaker duel, they are hard pressed to swap off of Widow in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gladiators have a ton of flex options, right? And they opted to go for what they consider to be their go-to strat in the GOATS comp, aka the 303, the triple tank, triple support. The problem was, Soon was perched up on the high ground there in the back by that first point, just going completely uncontested. The only tank that could have gotten the high ground in that situation was a D.Va, which couldn't be taken off just because D.Va is an integral part of that composition. So Soon was basically just hitting shot after shot after shot, and then the Gladiators just kept running in and die in. No, there was no way to, contest Soon at all, and just it was hard to watch because like I was so frustrated. I'm like, at least, like I get that they want to run Widow, but you could have at least put hydration on the Genji just to try to add extra pressure onto Soon. They didn't even try that. They went with 303, was a wrong call in a wrong situation, and yeah, it's just I don't know whose decision that was, if it was a coach decision or a player decision, but that definitely irked me because I know that they had other options to flex to, and they just opted to run a strat that in that moment was not going to work.
Yeah, first point Dorado would be really hard to make 303 work. I mean, the idea of 303 is to just basically run as a group, systematically kill the enemy team one by one, just basically mob your way 1-to-1. Dorado first point is hard though because there's a lot of nooks and crannies that Widow can hide in. There's not a lot of high ground, but there is a few high ground places where they can stand. And you could tell that Surefour was shaken by Soon at that point, and he did. I would venture to say that it was actually probably Surefour that led to this decision, just because he probably opted out of the Widow. He's like, I'm not doing anything. We need to switch this. It is strange that they opted for this for as versatile as their lineup goes. I mean, we've even seen Surefour flex to Genji and be serviceable, like
Right.
at least enough to get him through first point. Like they could have honestly ran Genji Doomfist and had a better shot at this. It's strange that they opted for this composition. I don't know if it was just fatigue at that point or just nerves were shot. I mean, I have this note for every game LA played on Sunday, but Space is a monster. Like Space just controlled so much space. Like it's stupid the things he can do. And Surefour had his hero moments, like for sure. Like there were multiple times that he tried his hardest to do the Fleta deadlift, but the only one who could do that is Fleta. So, it's on every level. Valiant outplayed Gladiators this whole series. Like the maps Gladiators won, they had to fight like tooth and nail to win it. Like they either had to do something cheeky or they, Surefour got a bunch of picks. Like it really came down to like micro plays, whereas the final, which we'll get into, was a much different type of game. But yeah, they said Space was the MVP, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
I'll talk about Seagull in the Dallas game, but Space and Seagull are very good when you compare them against each other because they both play very similarly, and it shows what D.Va is actually currently capable of that other teams haven't quite mastered yet. Like Space, Meko, and Seagull, I think, are the three that I would put up there in the top D.Va category right now.
Yeah, and just to kind of put it in perspective, right? You talk about Space and his monster performance. So, in this series, which should go 5 games, he died 17 times. But he got 135 kills. Like,
yeah,
that is a staggering number for anyone, let alone an off-tank player. And it's ridiculous. And, even the casters had brought it up, like, when Space became of age and played for the Valiant, it was very reminiscent of Fisher's impact for the LA Gladiators. And, while we didn't always get, like, an MVP performance across the board from Space, like, he was a definite standout player in both of their series. And I would be shocked if he doesn't compete in the World Cup based off of the performance that he just had in these stage playoffs, because that kid
I'd be disappointed if he doesn't at this point.
Yeah, so the other thing to really note is how, obviously, like, there's a lot of hype with the battle for LA. Obviously, all the games are being played in the Blizzard Arena in Los Angeles, but these are teams that have players that tend to play better against their LA counterpart than they do compared to the rest of the league, and we see that with agilities on the Junkrat and the Genji. We see it with Soon on the Widowmaker. Not so much sure for in this case, just because Soon bested him time and time again. But, I love how against certain teams, we just see someone play at that next level, regardless of what is on the line, and that's always fun to watch.
Fleta versus Dallas, like, what's that? Anyway.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of Dallas, they were involved in the other stage semis. And they were going up against the New York Excelsior. So, again, this one went to 5 maps, and both teams ended up completing their attacks over on Watchpoint Gibraltar. But the field were unable to make much progress during their time bank attack, so New York took the early lead 1-0. And then, going to the second map, I didn't write down what map the second one was on.
Horizon.
Okay, it was Horizon, and, 2CP lol. This was a battle of 2 stout defenses, with neither side managing to capture point A. New York were able to get enough with basically like 2 minutes left to spare. I mean, it was a very... 2CP is hard to watch at times, but like when it's a defensive duel like this, I get more invested just because like any little bit of pressure you can put on the point can turn it just to get that tick. And already like Horizon is one of those maps where people like to run like Tracer Sombra or run the 303 or 402 and just bully their way onto the point. And that's one of the few reasons why Horizon is actually watchable, but I'm not a fan of that map. But regardless, moving on. So New York were up 2-0 going into halftime, and all these were best of 5s. Or first to 3 if you're Slambo. Trying to figure that out. So we moved on to Lejeune Tower, where the field would strike back. They took both of the rounds. The first one was as close as you can get. It was 100-99. But in round 2, the field shut out the Excelsior, taking it 100-0. So we're at 2-1 going into Kings Row. Fuel managed to finish Kings Row with 1 minute and 28 seconds left in their time bank. And, their defense held on. New York was unable to complete the map, which brought us to Dorado, right? So, obviously, Dorado had some issues in the last series, and both teams on Dorado had their fair share of struggles, with neither team managing to reach the second objective. But in the end, it was New York holding on. They avoided the reverse sweep, but, man, there was some pretty cool moments in here. So obviously, something that we gotta talk about is Boldmu, right? Taimu has had his confidence, his swagger back. He was coming up in the series against Pine. The big boss versus Boldmu. And this match in particular delivered on that front on so many levels. And it wasn't a one-sided affair, as this one had a ton of back and forth. And, even at times, like, even AKM was holding his own in the duel before Pine took over. AKM started good, and then there was a lot of fall-off there. But, early on, that was also, like, a huge, like, hold my breath moment. I'm like, okay, AKM is coming in. It's been a little rocky. How's he going to do? And then he was hitting the shots early on. So I don't know if that was just a case of Pine maybe underestimating AKM initially, or, just that adjustment period, because obviously when you're going up against different Widowmakers, they have a different approach or different playstyle, things like that. But, I love watching Taimu play when he has that confidence back, because that's when we get to see him really start to go out of his way and make more aggressive plays and go for flanks, things like that. And Taimu definitely showed up. And if you want to talk about, like, a career-saving moment, like, obviously, Taimu, there were moments throughout the season where he wasn't feeling it, and he was very down on himself, because, he is a player that wears his emotions on his sleeve, and with the performance that he had in this series, I absolutely expect him to be back with the fuel.
Oh, without a doubt. I think this whole roster has kind of earned its right to at least fight for their spot. You mentioned the AKM Pine Widow duel. Honestly, at that point, I think you're right. I think Pine just was underestimating AKM. But the bigger side of it, I think, was Mono hadn't really kicked in at that point.
Right.
Like, that was like a pure Widow duel. And AKM actually has the advantage in the terrain on that Widow duel. Whereas once Mono kicked in and decided to get super aggressive and punish Dallas's aggression, because that was the other side of it, it put a lot more pressure on AKM, and it forced him into spots where Pine knew where he was, which is the most important thing in any Widow duel. And Pine's not going to miss those shots. And there were a lot of shots that Pine should have missed that he hit, which just further accentuates Pine time. It just keeps extending that clock. But the biggest thing they did on Gibraltar was Mono punished OG's and Mickey's aggression, because basically the way Dallas plays their comp, which is the Dallas comp at this point, is they're very aggressive up front, and they force tanks to peel, and you can't really peel into a Reinhardt and a Brigida. Like, you're basically jumping back into a blender, which is why it works so well. The problem is Mono and Meko realized the innate problem with this is that leaves their backline completely exposed. And when you got somebody with like Pine keeping AKM under wraps, and Siegel's doing what Siegel does as well as he can, you basically just shut down their backline, and then you can jump back in that blender regardless of who you lost. So their backline's gone, and that's how they won Gibraltar. They basically just outplayed their comp. Horizon was like, it was close, but it wasn't. Like, there were just a lot of mistakes that Dallas did conceptually. Like, it just seems like, and you actually see this later in Hanamura with the Valiant in the finals. Like, there were key plays that Dallas needed to hit, and there were just small mistakes that stopped them from hitting it. But Siegel tried his best that match. You could see like Siegel was trying as much as he could to do it that map. And I also want to point out that New York somehow pulled all of Dallas's worst maps statistically. Like, they dodged Hanamura. They ended up playing on Dorado, which I'll get to in a second. But halftime came in. Dallas made some adjustments. Their biggest adjustment was like what I alluded to earlier, is somehow they got New York to sub in Janus. And Janus is a good passive tank. Like, he plays a very passive style of tank, which I told you does not work against the Dallas comp. Like, it's basically the blender at that point. And that's what you see them walk into. That's why, the first point on Li Jiang was close, because New York actually got an early lead and then just kind of accentuated that through the game, but Dallas eventually grinded it out. And the second point, they never gave New York that opportunity, so they basically just grinded them down. Kings Row was interesting. Like, I actually pegged Dallas to lose Kings Row just because New York had never lost Kings Row. Like, they had never lost Kings Row at any point in this season. And Dallas did really well on attack. Like, they blew through attack to a third point, and then New York put up a very solid defensive third point and actually held them until, like you said, they had like a minute left. So that was actually a good stop by New York, because that could have easily steamrolled into Dallas having 5+ minutes left on the clock, which is demotivating even for New York. Like, any team would be demotivated at that point. But then New York did something really strange, and I don't know, like, I can't put this in the sandbag territory. Like, I feel like this is conceptually something New York just defaulted to because they haven't been practicing. And they tried to run a Farah dive comp on offense. And I guess they saw like the Valiant do it, and the Valiant had a little bit of success with it, but it just didn't work. So they basically burned off 4 minutes in defense. And New York eventually took it with like 30 seconds left. And at that point, they were basically just trying to play catch up. And they ran through Street's phase fine. But by the time they hit third point, they had like no time left. And that's basically what sealed it for them, because all Dallas had to do was basically put out a defense that was equal to 25% of what New York did. And that's how Dallas won Kings Row. Like, they basically just grinded out first point and rode that to a win. And then we get on Dorado, which I do have some fun statistics for you. Dallas in stage 4 averaged 1 point on Dorado. There's 3 points on a map just think about that. They averaged 1 point on Dorado, while New York statistically only averaged a little above 1 point on Dorado. But that is because they statistically held their opponents to an average of 0.82 points per attempt. So you are more likely than not taking first point when playing New York on Dorado. Like that, and just to give you an idea, Dallas typically holds second point, but they still gave up more points. So this was a huge lopside in New York's favor statistically. And like you said, we got to see Pine versus Taimu, and that 100% delivered. Like, unlike the AKM duel, there was no like slipping point where one got the advantage over the other. Mm-hmm. Like Taimu would sneak around, and Pine would get him, and then he would get Pine, and then there were multiple times that Pine would land 2 in a row, and Taimu was like, "F this," and he would like take some weird flank angle and just shut down Pine. Like it was a phenomenal like Widow series. But Dallas got stalled out on first point because apparently they don't know how to take first point because they don't do it very often. But they did eventually get it, but they were out of so much time that New York basically just grinded them and eventually stopped them in like a hero series right before second point. Like that final fight on Dallas's attack was phenomenal. Like just the micro plays that you see from like Jonak and Mono, like the little things that they do and where they position to keep their team alive is amazing and just stall it out. But then, they turn around and it's the same story as Gibraltar. Like OG and Mickey get aggressive. New York punishes it, takes first point super easily. So now Dallas has to basically defend second point for 5.5 minutes, and they did a good job. They held him for like 3.5. So it was a solid series all around. I think Dallas fans can hold their head high and walk away that this team finally delivered on a season of potential that we've kind of expected. And we won 2 more games than Seoul did in the playoffs. So we got that.
Yeah, I mean, that match also drew in like over 200,000 viewers on Twitch, which was...
It drew in more than the final.
Awesome. Yeah, it did.
It was a much better game than the final too, so...
Yeah, I actually didn't get to see the final live because we were doing some other stuff. But no, I was very happy to see that 200K mark when we were watching the semis. But speaking of the final... that would set up the LA Valiant going up against the New York Excelsior. So again, Excelsior haven't played in every stage final. So they have
one.
They have that. They haven't won all of them, but they have appeared in all of them. So they're 2-2 with this.
They've won as many as they've lost.
Yeah,
so
it's better than most teams can say because not really many of them made it.
Right.
Outside of New York, anyway. But the Valiant did take this one. It ended 3-1. So, I have to say, like, New York in this one, where the hell was the offense at? Because, Valiant full held New York on Dorado. All they needed, a couple early picks, was a done deal at that point. But New York would answer back with a full hold of their own, this one being on Hanamura, after the Valiant had prevented New York from completing the map. The series would then move over to Oasis, where the Valiant ended up taking both of the rounds. And New York's attack on Blizzard World netted absolutely nothing. Like, they had 0 progress. So it was a very clear win condition for the Valiant. And yeah, I mean, the Valiant, they got the win. The take home at $100,000 for their top performance. And we saw New York stick a lot with the Widowmaker paired with the Pharah throughout a lot of this series. And, I don't know what to say about this because, you and I both hype up Libero as a flex DPS player. And Soon was definitely getting his number. Space was all up in his face quite a bit, putting extra pressure on that. So that's 2 fronts that he had to worry about. And he kept opting to run this Pharah when it wasn't working. And, looking at New York's attack, like, they didn't get a single point on 3 of the 4 maps played in this series. That's like, just unheard of. Like, obviously, like,
Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a ton of narratives being thrown out by the community and the fans, but I don't care what narrative you want to drive. At the end of the day, the Valiant were the better team in this series, bar
Oh
none.
yeah.
And, you know, whether or not New York just isn't giving it their all or not, I don't care at this point, because obviously the stage playoffs are right around the corner. But, we got to see a lot of micromanagement happening with the Valiant's defense, especially on Blizzard World, and every look that New York tried to throw at them in terms of the approach was just completely shot down and negated. So, I have to give major props to the Valiant coaching staff and Moon, who honestly doesn't get enough credit at this point. So, definitely a lot of high points for the Valiant in this series. But man, New York just, they looked off, and I don't know how much of that is them just not wanting to scrim or anything like that, but the Valiant came to play, and that was a dominating performance for the Valiant. And the question mark that everyone's been wondering, like, okay, well, who can beat Excelsior? And we've been pushing the Gladiators. Maybe it is the Valiant being the most likely scenario at this point, because we had the best team in one division going up against the best team of the other division, and this one wasn't even close.
So first note, get this out of the way. Space is a monster. I told you I had that note for both matches he was in, so we'll get that out of there. But Valiant looked like a very different team. Like I'm gonna circle back to something we said last week, and we kind of talked about how we didn't think Valiant were confident enough to beat New York. Well, whatever they put in their Wheaties that morning made them confident enough, because the difference between this Valiant team and the Valiant team that, heck, even the Valiant team that played the Gladiators earlier in the day, is they were very aggressive. Like you harp on Agilities for his aggression, but it was very tempered and very pinpoint in this match. Like you can see that there were points when he was on whatever character he played, whether it was Brigida, Farah, Doomfist. We got to see a lot of looks out of Agilities. His aggression was like pinpoint, and that's, I think, what we've been waiting for all season. Like we've been waiting for this tempered Agilities that knows when to get in and knows when to get out, coupled with Soon just being on point. Like Soon was laying down so much pressure on Widowmaker. And we even got to see his Tracer at certain points. Like they were even able to flex to Tracer, which is Soon's bread and butter. Like, at that point, we saw Pine try to play Tracer, and Soon just destroyed him. Like, I forget which round it was, but they like cut to the Tracer duel, and it was like over, like immediately. Like Soon just clips him. And that happened. Honestly, I think this could have easily been a 3-0. But there was some mismanagement on Hanamura on Valiant's part. And it goes back to kind of what I was alluding to in Dallas, is they had a set play that they had been coached to do, and they misplayed it, and that ruined their chances, and they never got another chance to recreate that set play, which is basically like a Reinhardt Shatter combo. But if you look at their defense, which they did, point A kind of went iffy, but they put up a phenomenal point B defense. Like they were holding, New York to the point where New York didn't quite know what to do. So it wasn't so much that New York stepped up that second round. It's just Valiant made a few key mistakes, which a team, even at this level, at New York's level, even with the bags of sand tied around their ankles, are still going to exploit. They're I don't want to take any away from New York. They're still an extremely talented team. But yeah, like Valiant were firing on all cylinders. And then we see it go into the Blizzard World match, and again, like Valiant just stumped them. Like you can see in New York's head the wheels turning. Like, how can we break this puzzle? And then time expires, and they don't know how to do it. And then Valiant come in at this point, probably in the head of New York, and just grind it out. Like there was no big set Valiant play on Blizzard World. It was literally just a brawl that they got a few key picks and just grinded it out. So, we've kind of covered the whole gist of the final. Like it was it was really one-sided. Like I wish there was more analysis. Like I know I went into the Dallas game a lot more in depth because it was a much closer game. Like it was hard to really like Space bullied the back line. Jonak was a non-factor. Like, and to say that's the first time this whole season we've been able to say that. There's not much to break down, and we're starting to see this look from New York. And we keep saying sandbagging and stuff like that. And you can see that the lack of practice has caught up to them, but it starts to become a question of, is this meta affecting them more than we're letting on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, they have a talented team, and they've shown that they can run Brigida and stuff like that. And I fully expect what I said last week to come to fruition because Hanzo will be a big part, and Libero will stop freaking playing the Pharah. He's a good Pharah, but there's going to be some better options coming up at 1.24. But I'm curious to see how they right the ship at this point. Not that it's capsizing, like their ship's just gone a little bit off course. They're still New York. They're still very talented. And honestly, I don't think a team beyond LA Valiant has a player like Space that can shut down Jonak. Like, looking at the other teams, I don't see anybody like to the level of Space's level of play right now that can get in Jonak's face and cause him the problem that Space did. Fusion, maybe, if they play Poco and go full Fraggy Poco combo, because I don't think Sato Hoppa is working. But like, nobody on Valiant. Like, I don't have the faith in, not Valiant, London. Gladiators, no. I think they could win on other fronts, but you'd still have to contend with Jonak. So I think you're right. I think right now Valiant are the team that has the best shot to beating New York. And at this point in time, unless something crazy happens in the quarterfinals, I fully expect a Valiant New York final.
Yeah, and kind of like going back to the whole narrative that people have been pushing too, it gets to the point now where it makes you question, okay, well, like, did New York let off of the gas pedal too much? And at this point, like, obviously with New York dominating the vast majority of the season, anything outside of finishing first is going to be, underwhelming for New York. Everyone is expecting New York to win. And if they get, like, outed at the semifinals, or if they lose in the finals, that's definitely going to shake things up. But, man, like, the Valiant in this one, this is about as one-sided as you could get for a stage finals. So New York is going to have to come back looking strong. Otherwise, this narrative that people have been pushing, ourselves included, is going to be like the major focal point. So if they don't turn around, then they're basically just going to look like a bunch of fools, because they haven't put in they didn't put in the same amount of effort as the other teams to put their best foot forward and just try to ride the momentum. And yes, I know, like, obviously, with the Overwatch League season, isn't like a sprint. This is more of a marathon. So there is a fine line right in between those two. But that's definitely going to be the thing that everyone is going to have their eyes on. Just knowing how dominant, the Excelsior have just been across the board. So, hopefully, Libero will get back to form as soon as we get the Hanzo 2.0. And we'll see how exactly just the meta shift is going to affect certain teams. Because, obviously, this current patch, definitely cut the legs off of certain teams out there. Spitfire obviously struggled quite a bit. Boston, another one of the playoff teams, struggled probably more so than all the other teams that are in the playoffs. And, you had other teams that were looking good initially that kind of fell off, like Philadelphia Fusion. So, just across the board, like, there are teams that have looked good in more than one, patch. There are teams that have looked okay, here and there, but just haven't shown consistency. But, New York across the board, outside of the level that they put forward, has definitely been the most consistent team. So whether or not they'll be able to push it forward into the season playoffs remains to be seen. But the Valiant right now, feeling more I'm feeling a lot better about this team. So I'm still hoping that the Spitfire can figure things out, just because of their players on that lineup. But it's hard to feel confident in the team that just hasn't looked the same for 3 stages, really.
Yeah, we'll see how the playoffs shake up. I fully expect now that the regular season is over, I expect the teams to probably take maybe a week break, just kind of air it out, and then hop in and start working hard. Like all 6 teams, I fully expect this loss was what New York needed.
Absolutely.
Like I feel like had New York won stage 4, uh, the narrative would have gone through that, New York's the best team. It's going to be hard to beat them. But I feel like they would have coasted into the playoffs a little more had they won this. Like I fully expect their practice schedule would have went up to what it was, but I feel like this loss will really ignite their level of play. And I would hope to see a return to form, especially with the new meta and stuff like that. But I expect all the teams to really kick it into overdrive. Fusion has looked, honestly, outside of the Valiant, all the teams have looked kind of shaky here or there. Gladiators have been probably the third most consistent, but even they have had their problems here and there over stage 4. So overall, I think, season playoffs are going to be phenomenal to watch. The fact that it's such a long drawn out process, it's just not like stage playoffs where it's like best of 5. Here we go. Who's the better today? The fact that they have days set out for multiple best of 5s, I think, will help with the consistency side of it. So I'm ready for season playoffs. Bring it on.
Absolutely. So obviously, we got a little bit of time before then, so we'll definitely figure out what we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks until then. But that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close out the show here tonight. So one of the best ways to help us out, one of the easiest and quickest ways to do this, is to go leave us a positive review over on iTunes. We're always looking for feedback and constructive criticism to just offer us insight on how we can make for a better listening experience for you guys. We do have our podcast directory, Overwatch Recall. You can find that on our website at owlnshow.com/owrecall. There you'll find a list of all the Overwatch League, Path to Pro podcasts out there with episodic listings released every Sunday. So it's every week we get anywhere from 20, 25 new episodes just across the board. So a ton of great content out there. You can usually find me tweeting that out at OWRecall on Twitter. We do have some upcoming events. So we got our game night this Saturday. That is June 23rd, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So join us for a fun night of custom competitive games. Of course, we'll stream that live over on our channel. So no host stream, but I will still be streaming it. So technically it is, but it isn't. But, join us anyway. It'll be a fun night. We also have our upcoming tournament, which is a 3v3 lockout elimination tournament. This is on June 30th, so another week past this current Saturday. So that will start at 6 p.m. Pacific time, starting a little bit earlier, just in case of the amount of signups we get. So we'll stream all of those matches for the tournament live on our Twitch channel, and that will be casted by myself and the person that currently finds himself in the audio abyss and currently getting memed on our Twitch channel, Slambo. So we will have giveaways for the tournament entrance and the Twitch chat, so stay tuned for more details on that. But if you want to sign up, guys, just, find a few friends, register on Challenge, and go to challenge.com/OWLN, and we hope to see you there. And we did have our Pick'em wrap up this past week, and just a quick shout out to the top 5 players overall. So finishing in first, we had Thawne, who had 80,450 points. We had Board coming in at second, who had 80,000. Peel finished in third with 79,350. Jacqueline's Teriyaki finished fourth with 79,300, and High 5 T-Bone finished in fifth with 79,050. So, yeah, that's some pretty big numbers when we compare them to where we're at, which we're not gonna go over that. But I wasn't quite there.
I was really not quite there.
No.
But I will say, Who won
you won the
stage 4 out of the
stage.
hosts?
Yeah.
Who? So not forever third anymore. I won a stage.
Yeah, you
Just
want
like
just like
Dallas.
that. I was gonna say like just like Dallas, and Edinar did pretty good that stage too. I'm trying to figure out where he finished because I think he beat me too. I think he actually beat all of us.
Oh, he's so dead on game night.
Yeah, he had 17,800. You are 300 behind him.
Yeah, he's so dead game night.
But yeah, see, like if I didn't have to throw on that London game, I might have just barely edged you. Oh well, it is what it is. But thanks again to everyone that signed up for that. We had a ton of fun with that. And who knows? Maybe down the line we might even have a fantasy Overwatch League show. You never know. Crazier things have happened. But Spider, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners and viewers know where they can get a hold of our podcast over on these social medias.
Sure. If you'd like to contact the show via email, you can do that at contact@owlnshow.com. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at owlnshow. Website, like Toto mentioned, is www.owlnshow.com. We have our YouTube. You can just search Overwatch League Network on YouTube. We're still looking for subscribers to get that custom URL, so hit that subscribe button and the bell because we will be releasing stuff in the off season, as I alluded to earlier. You can find our Discord at discord.me/OWLNshow. If you listen to the audio, I highly advise you to check out our Twitch page. It is twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We have 3 core shows a week. The one you're listening to now is our Monday night show at 7 p.m. PDT. That is Overwatch League Network, the core Overwatch League show. We also have our variety Overwatch show, Heroes Never Die, which is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. PDT. After Infinity War, their 3-hour show about Symmetra, they kind of scaled it back a bit. So look for this week to be mostly about Overwatch League, and they have a few guest hosts this week, so that'll be pretty fun. We also have our Tier 2 Path to Pro Contenders show, which is the back cap. That is Thursdays at 7 p.m. PDT. I typically do a host stream Friday night, usually around 7:30 p.m. PDT. It's 10:30 my time because I'm on the East Coast. And then Totem typically does the Saturday stream, which, like you said, will be our game night this week. So
And the next
a lot
week.
of stuff going on. A lot of stuff. So
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I was just gonna say, like, so this week, for Heroes Never Die, we'll have Blaze and Bob on, from Watchpoint Radio, Prepare to Attack. I'll recap, and also Gabe from the Cavalry, and we'll actually be starting a little bit later, like an hour later than normal. So just an FYI on that, but should be a good one. I'm looking forward to talking more Overwatch League.
Yep. All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at SpiderGD. You can find me on Twitch pretty much right here, twitch.tv/OWLNshow. You can find Slambo and his empty chair at SlamboVerwatch on Twitter. And I don't think he does much on his Twitch, so I'm not going to push it. If he wants to push it, he has to show up to the show.
That is a fair point. As for myself, you can find me over on Twitter at TimelyDrunkCTR. And if I'm live on Twitch, I'm here on our channel, 3-4 nights a week, typically. I mean, I'm here for all the podcasts. I mean, like 99% of the time, I don't really fall into the audioverse like some people. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for tonight. I see, we're kind of in a bit of a lull period.
Right.
So it should be an interesting couple of weeks, just kind of across the shows. But we'll definitely find stuff to talk about. Maybe hype up certain matches, or talk about seasonal storylines for the playoff team, something like that.
Takeaways.
Just major storylines to watch, or takeaways that we have seen all in all. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead. We'll cut it out. Might flip it over to I'll recap because I know they're recording right now. So I'm just gonna, kick in the sounder and we'll take you guys there. But thank you so much for hanging out tonight, guys. And we'll be back on Wednesday for Heroes Never Die. So enjoy your nights, and we will see you back later in the week. Guys, have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLNshow. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.
All right, switching us over to the host.